Our next scale is known as double harmonic major. We can hear it in the traditional music of the Middle East, the Balkan Peninsula, and India. Compared to a major scale, it has a lowered second and a lowered sixth. So that gives us a pair of augmented intervals between the lowered second and the major third, and also between the lowered sixth and the major seventh. Most Western music is written using a scale, but it's worth mentioning that Arabic music uses something called a maqam, and Indian music uses a raga. Both of these terms are similar to the idea of a scale, but they're not exactly the same. A maqam and a raga are different, but each of them is like a framework for composition and improvisation. So each is more than just a set of notes with a tonic. I think that's all I'm qualified to say about them, but I encourage you to do your own research and learn more. So the double harmonic major scale kind of corresponds with the Arabic maqam known as Hijaz Kar. And our next piece is sort of inspired by traditional Arabic music. The composer adds a couple extra elements. Let's take a listen. This is example 4-4. Here it is. Alright, so it looks like we have a lot going on, but basically we can divide our piece into a melody, some background instruments, and a bass line. We're using a couple traditional instruments like the oud, which is an ancestor of the lute, and the ney, which is like a flute. First, let's talk about our melody. It's fairly prominent. It's played on the oud and doubled by violin and cello. So our melody just moves up and down the G double harmonic major scale. And sometimes the melody emphasizes the wide intervals between the flat 2 and the major third, and between the flat 6 and major 7th. It's written in 2 4-bar phrases, measures 1 through 4, and then 5 through 8. If you compare measures 1 and 5, you can see the melody starts off the same way. Underneath that, the xylophone and keyboard work together to create this rhythmic and harmonic background element. There's a little variation in bars 3 and 4. Now, let's look at the strings for a moment. They're actually playing this xylophone keyboard pattern, but at half the speed. So one measure of xylophone is spread out to 2 measures of strings. Or to put it another way, 2 measures of strings are condensed into 1 measure of the xylophone. So altogether, this creates a rich tapestry of harmony and rhythm. We also have a bass line, which just stays on G, and this is supported by the second oud up here. We have this rhythmic pattern between the upper and lower strings called hemiola. It's a 3-against-2 pattern, meaning for every 3 beats in the upper strings, we hear 2 notes in the lower strings. Normally, hemiola might sound like this. But in our piece, we have a rest on beats 1 and 4. So that's generally what's happening throughout. I think this isn't necessarily representative of Middle Eastern composition. After all, we're just not experts in that musical tradition. But this piece uses a prominent melody, which is one feature of traditional Middle Eastern music. and the composer added some supporting background elements like the xylophone keyboard pattern and the hemiola rhythm.